The rain drummed against the windows of Sweet Dreams Bakery as Megan Lewis stood frozen in the doorway, her wet hair clinging to her face, and her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the storm outside. The warm scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air, a stark contrast to the cold panic that had been consuming her for the past 3 days. "Ma'am, are you okay?" The voice belonged to a young woman behind the counter, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, flour dusting her apron. Ruby Martinez had been working the evening shift at Sweet Dreams for 2 years, and she'd seen plenty of customers come through those doors looking stressed about birthday cakes and wedding orders. But this woman looked different. Desperate. Megan's hands trembled as she approached the counter, her sneakers squeaking against the checkered linoleum floor. The bakery was nearly empty, just an elderly man in the corner reading a newspaper and sipping coffee, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in Megan's chest. Megan started, then stopped. How could she possibly explain what she needed? How could she tell this stranger that her entire world was falling apart, that her ex-husband David was threatening to take away the one good thing left in her life, and that she was about to ask something completely insane? Ruby set down the piping bag she'd been using to decorate a birthday cake and gave Megan her full attention. There was something in the woman's eyes, a kind of raw vulnerability that Ruby recognized all too well. She'd seen it in her own mirror plenty of times. "Take your time," Ruby said gently. "What can I help you with?" Megan looked around the bakery, noting the family photos on the walls, the cheerful yellow paint, the handwritten menu board advertising made with love specials. This place felt like everything her life wasn't. Warm, stable, welcoming. Maybe that's why the words came tumbling out before she could stop them. "My daughter's birthday is in 6 days, Megan began, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's turning 8, and I've been planning this party for weeks. Nothing fancy, just something special, something that would make her feel loved." Ruby nodded, pulling out an order form. "That's sweet. What kind of cake were you thinking?" "That's not..." Megan took a shaky breath. Yes, I need a cake, but that's not why I'm here. Not really." She glanced toward the window, where the rain was coming down even harder now. "My ex-husband is coming to the party. He's bringing his new girlfriend, this perfect woman with a perfect job and a perfect life. And he's going to try to convince the judge that Emma would be better off living with them." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and raw. Ruby's hand stilled on the order form, and she looked up at Megan with new understanding. "He's been looking for any excuse to prove I'm an unfit mother," Megan continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "The fact that I'm single, that I work 2 jobs just to keep our tiny apartment, that I can't afford the kind of life he can give her now, he's going to use all of it against me." Ruby set the pen down completely. "I'm sorry, that sounds really difficult, but I'm not sure how I can help with... I need you to pretend to be my wife." The words came out in a rush, so fast that for a moment Ruby wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. The elderly man in the corner looked up from his newspaper, and even the soft jazz playing over the bakery's speakers seemed to pause. "I'm sorry, what?" Ruby asked, certain she'd misunderstood. Megan's cheeks flushed red, but she pressed on. "I know how it sounds. I know it's crazy. But I've been thinking about this for 3 days and I can't come up with any other solution. If David sees that I've rebuilt my life, that I'm in a stable relationship, that Emma has a loving family environment, maybe he'll back off. Maybe he'll see that she's happy where she is." Ruby stared at her, speechless. In all her 26 years, she'd heard some strange requests working in customer service, but this was definitely a first. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" Ruby repeated slowly, as if saying it out loud might make it make more sense. "For your daughter's birthday party." "Not just the party," Megan said quickly. "The whole week leading up to it. David said he's coming to town early to assess the situation. He'll probably drive by the house, maybe even knock on the door. If he sees that I'm alone, that nothing's changed." She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Ruby looked at this woman, really looked at her. Megan was probably in her early 30s, with tired eyes and worry lines that seemed too deep for her age. Her clothes were clean but worn, and there was a small hole in the elbow of her cardigan that had been carefully mended. Everything about her spoke of someone who was trying her best with very little. "I can pay you," Megan added desperately. "Not much, but I have some savings. I was going to use it for Emma's birthday presents, but this is more important. If I lose her—" Her voice cracked, and she had to take a moment to compose herself. "Ma'am, I don't think—" "Please," the word came out as barely more than a breath. "I know you don't know me. I know this is insane, but I'm out of options. I've tried everything else. I've worked myself to the bone trying to prove that I can provide for her, but it's never enough. David has money, stability, a big house in the suburbs. All I have is love, and apparently that's not enough anymore." Ruby felt something twist in her chest. She thought about her own small apartment above the bakery, how quiet it got in the evenings when the last customer left, and she was alone with just the hum of the refrigerators and her own thoughts. She thought about the family photos on the bakery walls, other people's families, other people's happiness, and how she sometimes pretended they were hers when the loneliness got too heavy. "What's your daughter's name?" Ruby asked quietly. "Emma," Megan said, and her whole face softened when she said it. "Emma Rose Lewis. She's the most amazing kid you've ever met. She loves art and animals, and she makes up these incredible stories about everything. Last week she told me that the pigeons outside our apartment building are actually secret agents reporting back to the pigeon president about human behavior." Despite everything, Ruby found herself smiling. "That's pretty creative." "She is. She's brilliant and funny and kind, and she deserves so much better than what I can give her. But I love her more than anything in this world, and I can't let David take her away from me. I won't." The determination in Megan's voice was fierce, almost desperate. Ruby had never heard anyone speak with such raw, protective love, and it stirred something deep inside her that she'd thought was long buried. "Why me?" Ruby asked. "You don't even know me." Megan looked around the bakery again, taking in the warmth and care that was evident in every detail. "Because you work here," she said simply. "Because you make beautiful things that bring people joy. Because when I walked in here soaking wet and probably looking crazy, you didn't judge me or rush me out the door. You listened." Ruby was quiet for a long moment, considering. It was completely insane. She didn't know this woman, didn't know anything about her life or her situation beyond what she'd just shared. Getting involved in someone else's custody battle, even peripherally, could be complicated and messy. But then she thought about the way Megan's voice had changed when she talked about her daughter, the fierce love that had transformed her entire demeanor. Ruby had never experienced that kind of love, not as a child, and certainly not as an adult. The idea of helping to preserve it, even in some small way, was unexpectedly appealing. "1 week?" Ruby asked. Megan nodded eagerly. "Just until after the party. Once David sees that Emma is happy and well cared for, hopefully he'll drop the custody challenge." "And what exactly would this involve?" "Nothing inappropriate," Megan said quickly. "Just being around. Maybe answering the door if he shows up, coming to the party as my partner, making it look like we're together, like Emma has a stable family environment." Ruby thought about her schedule. She worked evenings at the bakery, but her days were mostly free. She thought about her empty apartment, her non-existent social life, the way she sometimes went entire weekends without speaking to another human being. "I don't know anything about being in a relationship," Ruby said honestly. "I mean, I've dated, but nothing serious. I wouldn't know how to act like someone's wife." "Neither do I, really," Megan admitted. "David and I were together for 10 years. But we were so young when we got married. I barely remember what it was like when things were good between us." They looked at each other across the counter, two women who had somehow found themselves in the most unlikely of circumstances. The rain continued to pound against the windows, and the elderly man had gone back to his newspaper, leaving them in their own little bubble of possibility and uncertainty. "If I said yes," Ruby said slowly, "and I'm not saying I am, but if I did, what would we tell your daughter?" Megan's face lit up with the first real hope Ruby had seen since she'd walked through the door. "Emma's been asking me about dating, actually. She's at that age where she's starting to notice that some of her friends have 2 parents at home. I could tell her that I've been seeing someone, that it's still new, but that I wanted her to meet you before the party. And she'd be okay with that?" "Emma just wants me to be happy," Megan said softly. She's been worried about me since the divorce. Sometimes I catch her watching me with this concerned look that no 8-year-old should have to wear. If she thought I'd found someone who cared about me..." Ruby felt that twist in her chest again. She thought about 8-year-old Emma, worrying about her mother's happiness. She thought about Megan, working 2 jobs and mending holes in her sweater, and still trying to give her daughter the best birthday party she could manage. "What are your jobs?" Ruby asked. "The 2 you mentioned. I clean offices downtown 3 mornings a week, and I work at the grocery store on weekends," Megan said. "It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." "Mostly," Ruby nodded. She made decent money at the bakery, especially with the overtime she picked up during busy seasons. She had savings, no dependents, no real expenses beyond her basic needs. The contrast between their situations wasn't lost on her. "This is crazy," Ruby said, more to herself than to Megan. "Completely insane," Megan agreed. "I understand if you can't do it. I understand if you think I'm out of my mind for even asking." Ruby looked at her, really looked at her. She saw the exhaustion, yes, but also the strength. She saw someone who had been knocked down repeatedly, but kept getting back up for the sake of someone she loved. She saw someone who was willing to ask a complete stranger for help because she'd run out of other options. And maybe, just maybe, she saw an opportunity to be part of something meaningful for the first time in a very long time. "1 week," Ruby said finally. Megan's eyes widened. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying yes," Ruby said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I'll do it. I'll pretend to be your wife for 1 week." The relief that washed over Megan's face was so profound that Ruby felt tears prick at her own eyes. Megan reached across the counter and grabbed Ruby's hands, squeezing them tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. I promise I'll make this as easy as possible for you. I'll give you my address, my phone number, whatever you need. We can meet tomorrow to go over the details, figure out our story." Ruby nodded, her mind already racing with questions and logistics. "What's your last name? I should probably know that if we're supposed to be married." "Lewis, Megan Lewis. And you're—" "Ruby Martinez." "Ruby Martinez Lewis," Megan said, testing it out. "Or Lewis Martinez. How do we want to handle that?" The absurdity of the situation hit Ruby all at once, and she started to laugh. Not a bitter laugh or a nervous laugh, but a genuine, surprised laugh that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep inside her. "I can't believe I just agreed to this," she said, shaking her head. Megan started laughing too, and for a moment they were just 2 women giggling over the counter of a bakery while rain pounded against the windows, and the world outside continued on, completely unaware that their lives had just taken the most unexpected turn imaginable. "So," Ruby said when their laughter subsided, "I guess we should talk about that birthday cake too." The next morning, Ruby stood outside 412 Maple Street, clutching a paper bag containing 2 coffee cups and a box of pastries from the bakery. The neighborhood was older, with small houses that had seen better days but were clearly loved by their residents. Flower boxes lined front porches, and children's bikes were scattered across tiny front yards. It was the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names and looked out for each other's kids. Megan's house was a small blue bungalow with white trim that needed repainting and a front porch that sagged slightly on one side, but the small garden was carefully tended, and there were cheerful yellow curtains in the windows. A child's chalk art decorated the front walkway, hopscotch squares and rainbow flowers that made Ruby smile despite her nerves. Before she could second-guess herself, Ruby knocked on the front door. She heard footsteps inside, then the sound of multiple locks being undone. When the door opened, she was greeted by a small face peering around Megan's legs. "Emma, this is Ruby," Megan said, her voice warm but slightly nervous. "The friend I told you about." Emma Lewis was exactly as Ruby had imagined, all big eyes and wild curly hair, with paint stains on her fingers and a gap-toothed smile that was absolutely infectious. She was wearing a t-shirt with a dinosaur on it and mismatched socks, one purple and one with tiny tacos printed on it. "Hi," Emma said shyly, then looked up at her mother. "Is she the one who makes the pretty cakes?" "That's right," Megan said, stepping aside to let Ruby in. "Ruby works at Sweet Dreams Bakery. I brought some pastries," Ruby said, holding up the bag. And coffee for your mom. Emma's eyes lit up. What kind of pastries? Emma, Megan warned gently, but Ruby was already kneeling down to Emma's level. Well, Ruby said conspiratorially, I brought chocolate croissants, blueberry muffins, and some of those sugar cookies with the rainbow sprinkles. But I'm not sure which ones are best for breakfast. Definitely the chocolate croissants, Emma said seriously. Chocolate is basically a food group, right, Mom? Megan laughed, and Ruby could see some of the tension leave her shoulders. According to Emma's food pyramid, yes. Come on in, Ruby. Welcome to our chaos. The inside of the house was small but cozy, with mismatched furniture that somehow worked together perfectly. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator and most of one wall, and there were books everywhere, stacked on tables, tucked into corners, creating small towers next to the couch. It felt lived in and loved, the kind of home that wrapped around you like a warm hug. Sorry about the mess, Megan said, quickly gathering up some of Emma's art supplies from the coffee table. We were working on decorations for the party. It's not messy, Ruby said honestly. It's homey. Emma had already claimed one of the chocolate croissants and was examining it with the serious attention of a food critic. Do you live in a bakery? She asked Ruby. Kind of, Ruby said, settling onto the couch. I have an apartment above the bakery, so I can smell bread baking when I wake up in the morning. That sounds like the best thing ever, Emma said with deep conviction. As they ate breakfast together, Ruby found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't expected. Emma chattered about school and her friends, and the story she was writing about a dragon who was afraid of fire. Megan listened with the kind of focused attention that made it clear Emma was the center of her universe. Emma, why don't you go get ready for school while Ruby and I talk about grown-up stuff? Megan suggested when they'd finished eating. Boring grown-up stuff or interesting grown-up stuff? Emma asked. Definitely boring, Megan said with a smile. The most boring grown-up stuff imaginable. Emma sighed dramatically, but headed toward what Ruby assumed was her bedroom, calling over her shoulder. Ruby, will you still be here when I get home from school? Ruby looked at Megan, who nodded encouragingly. I'll be here, Ruby called back. When they heard Emma's bedroom door close, Megan's demeanor shifted slightly, becoming more serious. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up. I thought you might wake up this morning and realize how crazy this whole thing is. Oh, I definitely realized how crazy it is, Ruby said. But I'm here anyway. Megan smiled, and Ruby noticed how much younger she looked when she wasn't carrying the weight of worry. So, we should probably figure out our story. How long have we been together? How did we meet? David's going to ask questions. Ruby pulled out her phone and opened the Notes app. Okay, let's think about this logically. If we've been together long enough for you to introduce me to Emma, but it's still new enough that we're not living together yet. Maybe 6 months? Megan suggested. That would put us meeting right around the time the divorce was finalized. Where did we meet? Megan thought for a moment. The bakery, actually. That part can be true. I've been there a few times to get Emma treats. We could say we started talking. You asked me out. I asked you out? Ruby raised an eyebrow. You seem like the type who would make the first move, Megan said with a grin. More confident than me, anyway. Ruby wasn't sure about that, but she made a note anyway. Okay, so we met at the bakery 6 months ago. I asked you out. We've been dating since then. What about the serious stuff? Are we talking about moving in together? Marriage? David's going to want to know how committed we are. Megan's cheeks flushed slightly. We should probably say we're taking it slow because of Emma. That I wanted to make sure she was comfortable with the idea before we made any big changes. That makes sense, Ruby agreed. What about my background? Job, family, education? Just be yourself, Megan said. You work at the bakery, you're good with kids, you're kind and patient. That's all true. Ruby made more notes, trying to think of what else they might need to cover. What about physical affection? I mean, if we're supposed to be a couple. The question hung in the air between them, and Ruby felt her cheeks warm. She hadn't really thought about this aspect when she'd agreed to help. Nothing that makes you uncomfortable, Megan said quickly. Maybe just holding hands, standing close together. We don't have to be overly affectionate. Right, Ruby said, making another note. Keep it simple. They spent the next hour going over details, creating a timeline of their fictional relationship, and discussing what Ruby should know about Emma's routines and preferences. By the time Emma emerged from her room, backpack slung over her shoulder and hair somewhat tamed, they had a basic framework in place. I'm ready for school, Emma announced. Ruby, do you want to walk with us? Mom always walks me to the bus stop. Ruby looked at Megan, who nodded. That would be nice, Ruby said. The walk to the bus stop was only 2 blocks, but it gave Ruby a chance to see the neighborhood through Emma's eyes. Emma pointed out the house where her friend Sophia lived, the tree that had the best climbing branches, and the spot where she'd found a really cool rock that looked like a heart. That's Mrs. Chen, Emma said, waving to an elderly woman watering her garden. She gives me peppermints sometimes. Mrs. Chen waved back, and Ruby noticed how her gaze lingered on them curiously. Word would definitely get around the neighborhood that Megan had a new friend. At the bus stop, Emma hugged her mother goodbye, then surprised Ruby by hugging her too. See you after school, Ruby. As the bus pulled away, Megan and Ruby walked back toward the house in comfortable silence. Ruby found herself thinking about how natural it had felt, walking Emma to school like they were a real family. She likes you, Megan said as they reached the front porch. She's easy to like, Ruby replied. She's amazing, Megan. You've done such a good job with her. Megan's eyes filled with tears, and she had to look away for a moment. Some days I feel like I'm failing her completely, like I'm not enough. You're wrong, Ruby said firmly. That little girl adores you. Anyone can see that. They settled back in the living room, and Megan pulled out a photo album. I thought you should see some pictures in case David asks about our relationship. And I want to show you what he's like so you know what we're dealing with. The album was full of pictures of Emma at various ages, but also some older photos of Megan, and a tall man with dark hair and a confident smile. David Lewis looked like the kind of person who was used to getting his way. Successful, polished, the type who wore expensive suits and drove luxury cars. He wasn't always like this, Megan said, noticing Ruby's expression. When we were young, he was different, kinder, but success changed him. The more money he made, the more important he became at his firm. The more he started to see people as problems to be solved or obstacles to be overcome. What does he do? Corporate law. He makes more in a month than I make in a year. Megan turned the page to a photo of David holding baby Emma. He loves her, in his way, but he thinks love means providing the best of everything. The best schools, the best clothes, the best opportunities. He doesn't understand that what Emma needs most is just to be loved for who she is. Ruby studied the photos, trying to imagine what it would be like to face this man and convince him that she and Megan were a real couple. David looked like someone who would ask probing questions and notice inconsistencies. When is he coming? Ruby asked. Tomorrow, Megan said, and Ruby could hear the anxiety creeping back into her voice. He called last night and said he wants to take Emma to dinner, just the 2 of them. But I know he's really coming to check up on me, to see if anything's changed. Then we better make sure we're ready, Ruby said, closing the album. What time does Emma get home from school? Around 3:30. Ruby checked her watch. It was just past 9, which gave them several hours to prepare. Okay, here's what I think we should do. I should bring some of my things over here. Make it look like I spend time here regularly. Maybe leave a coffee mug in the sink, put a book on the nightstand, that kind of thing. Megan nodded. That's smart. What else? We should practice, Ruby said, feeling slightly ridiculous even as she said it. I mean, we should get comfortable with each other. If David's as sharp as you say he is, he'll notice if we seem awkward together. Practice how? Ruby stood up and held out her hand. Start with something simple. Hold my hand. Megan looked at Ruby's outstretched hand for a moment before taking it. Her fingers were smaller than Ruby's and slightly cold from nerves. See? That's not so bad, Ruby said, giving Megan's hand a gentle squeeze. Now, if David shows up and we're sitting together, this would look natural. They practiced sitting close together on the couch, standing with Ruby's arm around Megan's shoulders. Even a brief, awkward hug. It felt strange at first, but Ruby was surprised by how quickly it started to feel normal. "You're a good teacher," Megan said as they took a break. "Have you ever acted before?" "Just in high school drama club," Ruby said. "But this isn't really acting, is it? We're just being a version of ourselves that happens to be in a relationship." "Is that what you think relationships are like?" Megan asked curiously. "Just being yourself with someone else?" Ruby considered the question. "I don't know. I've never been in a serious relationship. What do you think?" "I thought I knew," Megan said softly. "David and I were together for so long. But looking back, I'm not sure I was ever really myself with him. I was always trying to be what he wanted me to be." "What did he want you to be?" "Perfect," Megan said simply. "The perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect accessory to his perfect life. But I'm not perfect. I'm messy and emotional, and I burn dinner sometimes, and I cry during commercials. He never knew what to do with that." Ruby thought about the woman she'd met yesterday. Desperate and vulnerable, but also fierce and determined. "You're not messy," she said. "You're real." Megan looked at her with surprise, as if no one had ever said anything like that to her before. "Thank you," she said quietly. They spent the rest of the morning making Ruby's presence in the house more believable. Ruby brought over a change of clothes, some toiletries, and a few books. She helped Megan clean the house and prepare for Emma's return from school. And somewhere in the process, it stopped feeling like an elaborate charade and started feeling like something else entirely. When Emma burst through the front door that afternoon, full of stories about her day and excitement about seeing Ruby again, it felt natural for Ruby to be there. It felt like coming home. "Ruby!" Emma called out, dropping her backpack by the door. "Guess what happened at school today?" "What happened?" Ruby asked, settling onto the couch as Emma climbed up beside her. "Tommy Peterson said that girls can't be astronauts, so I told him about Sally Ride and Mae Jemison and Peggy Whitson, and then Mrs. Johnson said I could do a presentation about women astronauts for the whole class." "That's amazing," Ruby said, genuinely impressed. "You really showed him." "Mom says knowledge is the best weapon against ignorance," Emma said proudly. Ruby glanced at Megan, who was watching them with a soft smile. "Your mom is very smart, the smartest," Emma agreed. "Are you staying for dinner, Ruby?" Ruby looked at Megan, who nodded. "I'd love to stay for dinner." As they prepared a simple meal together, spaghetti with marinara sauce and a salad, Ruby found herself thinking about how easy this felt. Emma chattered about her friends and her upcoming birthday party. Megan hummed while she cooked, and Ruby helped set the table and pour drinks. It was domestic and comfortable in a way that Ruby had never experienced before. "Ruby," Emma said as they sat down to eat, "do you have any kids?" "No," Ruby said. "I don't. Do you want kids someday?" Ruby glanced at Megan, who was watching the conversation with interest. "I think so," Ruby said honestly. "I've never really thought about it seriously, but being around you makes me think it might be nice." Emma beamed. "You'd be a good mom. You're patient, and you listen, and you don't talk to me like I'm a baby." "Thank you," Ruby said, feeling unexpectedly touched. "That means a lot." After dinner, they worked on Emma's astronaut presentation together, with Ruby helping to find pictures online, while Megan and Emma wrote out facts on poster board. It was the kind of evening Ruby had always imagined families had, but had never experienced herself. When it was time for Emma's bath and bedtime routine, Ruby started to gather her things to leave, but Emma protested. "Can't Ruby read me a story tonight?" Emma asked. "Please?" Megan looked at Ruby questioningly. "If you don't mind, I'd love to," Ruby said, and she meant it. Emma's bedroom was small but cozy, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and bookshelves lining one wall. Emma chose a book about a brave princess who saved her kingdom with kindness instead of a sword, and Ruby read it with all the dramatic flair she could muster, doing different voices for each character. "That was perfect," Emma said sleepily as Ruby tucked her in. "Will you be here when I wake up?" Ruby looked toward the doorway, where Megan was standing and listening. "I'll be here," Ruby said. "Good," Emma said, already half asleep. I like having you here, Ruby. It makes Mom smile more. As they left Emma's room and closed the door softly behind them, Ruby felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't just about helping Megan anymore, or even about keeping Emma with her mother. Somewhere in the space of a single day, Ruby had started to care about these people in a way that surprised her. Thank you, Megan said as they settled back in the living room. For everything. For being so good with her. For making this feel what? Real, Megan said softly. For a few hours tonight, it felt like we were actually a family. Ruby nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. David's coming tomorrow? Tomorrow evening. He's taking Emma to dinner at that new place downtown, the one with the fancy kids menu. Are you nervous? Terrified, Megan admitted, but also hopeful. Today went so well. If we can convince Emma that we're together, maybe we can convince David too. Ruby reached over and took Megan's hand, the gesture feeling natural now after their practice session that morning. We can do this, she said. We're going to give Emma the best birthday party ever, and we're going to show David that she's exactly where she belongs. Megan squeezed Ruby's hand, and for a moment they sat in comfortable silence, both thinking about the week ahead and the strange turn their lives had taken. Ruby? Megan said finally. Yeah? I'm really glad you said yes. Ruby smiled, thinking about Emma's gap-toothed grin and the way Megan's whole face lit up when she talked about her daughter. Me too, she said. Me too. Ruby woke up the next morning in Megan's guest room, a tiny space that doubled as an office, with a pull-out couch and Emma's overflow art supplies stacked in neat boxes along one wall. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, and she could hear voices in the kitchen, Megan and Emma having breakfast and discussing the day ahead. For a moment, Ruby lay still and listened to their easy conversation, the way Emma's laughter bubbled up at something her mother said, the gentle way Megan reminded Emma to brush her teeth after breakfast. It was such a normal, everyday scene, but to Ruby it felt precious and fragile, like something that needed to be protected. Ruby, Emma's voice called from the kitchen. Are you awake? Mom made pancakes. Ruby smiled and called back, I'll be right there. She quickly got dressed and joined them in the kitchen, where Emma was already dressed for school and Megan was packing her lunch. Good morning, Megan said, and Ruby noticed the tension around her eyes. I hope the couch was comfortable enough. It was perfect, Ruby said, accepting the cup of coffee Megan handed her. How are you feeling about tonight? Like I might throw up, Megan said quietly, glancing toward Emma to make sure she wasn't listening. But we'll get through it. Emma looked up from her pancakes. Daddy's coming tonight, she announced. He's taking me to Romano's for dinner. They have spaghetti and meatballs that are bigger than golf balls. That sounds amazing, Ruby said, sitting down beside her. Are you excited to see him? Yeah, Emma said, but Ruby noticed a slight hesitation. I just wish he could come to my birthday party instead of just dinner, but he says he has to go back to Chicago for work. Ruby and Megan exchanged a look. David was coming to evaluate the situation, not to celebrate his daughter's birthday. Well, we'll make sure your party is extra special, Ruby said. Your mom and I have been planning some surprises. Emma's eyes lit up. What kind of surprises? If we told you, they wouldn't be surprises, Megan said with a smile. Now finish your breakfast so we can walk to the bus stop. The morning routine felt even more natural than it had the day before. Ruby helped Emma gather her school supplies while Megan finished packing lunch, and they all walked to the bus stop together. Mrs. Chen was in her garden again, and this time she waved them over. Good morning, Megan, she said, her curious gaze moving between Megan and Ruby. I don't think I've met your friend, Mrs. Chen. This is Ruby, Megan said, and Ruby noticed how she moved slightly closer to her, their shoulders touching. Ruby, this is Mrs. Chen. She's been our neighbor for 3 years. It's nice to meet you, Ruby said, shaking the older woman's hand. Ruby works at Sweet Dreams Bakery, Emma chimed in. She makes the most beautiful cakes you've ever seen. How lovely, Mrs. Chen said, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. Are you visiting for long, Ruby? I'm around quite a bit these days, Ruby said carefully. Megan and Emma have become very important to me. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly, and Ruby could practically see her filing away this information to share with the other neighbors later. When Emma's bus arrived, Mrs. Chen was still watching them with interest. "She's going to tell everyone on the block that you have a girlfriend," Megan said as they walked back to the house. "Is that a problem?" "No," Megan said quickly. "Actually, it's perfect. The more people who see us together, the more believable our story becomes." They spent the morning continuing to make Ruby's presence in the house feel natural. Ruby rearranged some books on the shelves, adding a few of her own to the mix. She put a coffee mug in the dishwasher and left a hair tie on the bathroom counter. Small details that would suggest she spent significant time there. Around noon, Megan's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went pale. "It's David," she said. Ruby moved closer, offering silent support as Megan answered the call. "Hello, David," Megan said, her voice carefully neutral. Ruby could hear David's voice through the phone, though she couldn't make out the words. His tone was crisp and businesslike, even when talking to his ex-wife. "Yes, Emma's excited to see you," Megan was saying. "Romano's at 6 o'clock, I remember." "No, David, you can't pick her up early. She has school, and I'm not disrupting her routine just because you decided to come to town." "What do you mean? You want to see the house?" Ruby felt her stomach clench. This was it. The moment they'd been preparing for. "I suppose that's fine," Megan continued, though her knuckles were white where she gripped the phone. "But make it quick. Emma needs time to get ready for dinner with you." 4 o'clock? Fine. We'll see you then." She hung up and immediately sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. "He wants to come by before dinner," she said. "He says he wants to see Emma, but I know he's really coming to check up on me, to see if anything's changed." Ruby sat beside her and took her hands. "Hey, look at me. We've got this, remember? We've been practicing. We know our story. Everything's going to be fine. What if he asks questions we haven't thought of? What if he can tell we're not really together? What if—" "Megan," Ruby said firmly. "Stop. You're spiraling. Take a deep breath." Megan closed her eyes and took several slow, deep breaths. When she opened them again, she looked calmer but still worried. "I'm sorry," she said. I can't lose her, Ruby. I can't." "You won't," Ruby said with more confidence than she felt. "We're going to show David that Emma is happy and loved and exactly where she belongs." They spent the next few hours going over their story one more time and making sure the house looked perfect. Ruby helped Megan clean and organize, and they worked together to create a space that looked like a happy, stable home where a child was thriving. When Emma got home from school, she was bubbling with excitement about seeing her father, but also full of questions about Ruby. "Ruby, are you going to meet my daddy tonight?" Emma asked as she settled at the kitchen table with a snack. "I'll be here when he comes to pick you up," Ruby said. "I'm looking forward to meeting him. He's really tall," Emma said. "And he wears suits all the time, even on weekends. And he has a really fancy car that's so clean you can see your reflection in it." "He sounds very successful," Ruby said. "He is," Emma said proudly. "But he works a lot. Sometimes when I visit him, he has to take phone calls during dinner." Ruby and Megan exchanged a look. Even Emma, at 8 years old, had noticed that her father's priorities weren't always in the right place. At exactly 4 o'clock, a sleek black sedan pulled up in front of the house. Ruby watched through the window as David Lewis got out of the car, straightening his expensive suit jacket and checking his watch. He was exactly as she'd imagined from the photos. Tall, handsome, and polished, with the kind of confidence that came from always being the smartest person in the room. "He's here," Ruby said quietly. Megan took a deep breath and smoothed her hair. She was wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, and Ruby had helped her with her makeup earlier. She looked beautiful and put together, like someone who had her life figured out. "Remember," Ruby said, taking Megan's hand. "We're happy. We're in love. Emma is thriving." The knock on the door was firm and authoritative. Megan opened it with a smile that looked almost natural. "Hello, David," she said. "Come in." David stepped into the house, his sharp eyes immediately taking in every detail. He was even more imposing in person, with the kind of presence that filled a room and demanded attention. "Megan," he said with a polite nod. "The house looks nice." "Thank you," Megan said. "David, I'd like you to meet Ruby Martinez." "Ruby, this is David, Emma's father." Ruby stepped forward with what she hoped was a confident smile and extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you, David. I've heard so much about you." David's handshake was firm, and his gaze was assessing. "Ruby?" he said. "I don't think Megan mentioned you when we spoke about the custody arrangements." "We've been taking things slowly," Megan said, moving to stand beside Ruby. "I wanted to make sure Emma was comfortable before introducing anyone new into her life." "Daddy!" Emma's voice rang out as she ran into the living room and threw herself into David's arms. "You're here!" David's entire demeanor changed when he saw his daughter. His face softened, and his smile became genuine and warm. Whatever his flaws as a husband, it was clear that he loved Emma deeply. "There's my girl," he said, lifting her up and spinning her around. "You've gotten so big since I saw you last month." "I lost another tooth," Emma said proudly, showing him the gap in her smile. "And I'm writing a story about astronauts, and Ruby helped me with research for my presentation at school." David's eyes flicked to Ruby with new interest. "Ruby helped you with schoolwork? She knows lots of stuff," Emma said. "And she makes the most amazing cakes. She's going to make my birthday cake, and it's going to be the most beautiful cake ever." "Is that so?" David said, setting Emma down but keeping his hands on her shoulders. "And how long have you known Ruby, sweetheart?" "A few months," Emma said. "She makes Mom smile a lot, and she reads really good bedtime stories with different voices for all the characters." Ruby felt David's gaze on her, sharp and evaluating. She could practically see him cataloging every detail, looking for inconsistencies or red flags. "Ruby works at Sweet Dreams Bakery," Megan said, moving closer to Ruby and taking her hand. The gesture looked natural, like something they'd done 1,000 times before. "That's actually where we met. How romantic," David said, though his tone suggested he found it anything but. "And you live nearby, Ruby?" "I have an apartment above the bakery," Ruby said, "but I spend a lot of time here. Megan and Emma have become very important to me." "I see," David said. "And what are your intentions with my ex-wife and daughter?" The question was direct and challenging, clearly designed to put Ruby on the spot, but Ruby had been expecting something like this. "I care about them both very much," Ruby said simply. "Megan is an amazing woman and an incredible mother. Emma is smart and funny and creative. I feel lucky to be part of their lives." "Ruby's teaching me how to decorate cakes," Emma chimed in, "and she's going to help me plant a garden in the backyard this spring." David looked around the living room again, taking in the family photos, the children's artwork on the walls, the comfortable furniture that had clearly been chosen for function over form. Ruby could see him comparing it to whatever life he could offer Emma. Probably a big house in an expensive neighborhood with all the latest gadgets and designer furniture. "The house seems cozy," he said finally. "It's home," Megan said firmly. "Emma's happy here." "I am happy," Emma said. "I love my room and my school and my friends. And now I love having Ruby here too." David crouched down to Emma's level. "Sweetheart, you know that if you ever wanted to come live with me in Chicago, you could have your own big room and go to a really good private school." "But then I wouldn't see Mom every day," Emma said, looking confused. "And I wouldn't see Ruby or my friends or Mrs. Chen or anyone." "You could make new friends," David said gently, "and you could visit Mom on weekends." Ruby saw Megan's face go pale, and she felt a surge of anger at David for having this conversation in front of Emma. This wasn't about what was best for Emma. This was about David proving a point. "Daddy," Emma said seriously, "I don't want to live in Chicago. I want to live here with Mom, and Ruby," she added, looking between the two women with a smile. David stood up slowly, his jaw tight. Ruby could see that Emma's response wasn't what he'd been hoping for. "Well," he said, checking his watch, "we should probably head to dinner. Are you ready to go, Emma?" "Almost," Emma said. "I just need to get my jacket." As Emma ran to her room, David turned to Megan and Ruby with a more serious expression. "I have to say, Megan, this is unexpected," he said. "When did this relationship begin exactly?" About 6 months ago, Megan said, her voice steady. Right after the divorce was finalized. And you didn't think to mention it during our custody discussions? Our personal lives weren't part of those discussions, Megan said firmly. Emma's well-being was. Emma's well-being is exactly what I'm concerned about, David said. I hope you understand that I'll need to know more about Ruby's background before I'm comfortable with her being around my daughter so much. Ruby felt her temper flare, but she kept her voice calm. I understand your concern, David. If you have specific questions about my background or my relationship with Emma and Megan, I'm happy to answer them. I might take you up on that, David said, his tone making it clear that this wasn't over. Emma returned with her jacket, and David's demeanor immediately shifted back to loving father mode. Ready for some giant meatballs? He asked with a smile. Ready, Emma said, hugging both Megan and Ruby goodbye. I'll see you later, okay? Have fun, sweetheart, Megan said, kissing the top of Emma's head. Be good for your dad. I'll have her back by 8, David said. We need to talk more, Megan. Soon. After they left, Megan sank onto the couch and put her head in her hands. That was awful, she said. Did you see the way he looked at everything? Like he was making a list of all the ways this place isn't good enough. Ruby sat beside her and rubbed her back gently. But did you see Emma's face when he suggested she move to Chicago? She was horrified. She doesn't want to leave, Megan. She wants to stay here with you. For now, Megan said. But what if David convinces her that his life is better? What if he starts buying her expensive things and promising her trips to Disney World and private schools? Emma's not stupid, Ruby said. She knows what matters. She knows you love her. Love doesn't pay for college, Megan said bitterly. Love doesn't buy the latest iPhone or designer clothes or any of the things David can give her. Ruby was quiet for a moment, thinking about Emma's reaction to David's offer. You know what I noticed? She said finally. When David was trying to sell her on Chicago, Emma didn't ask about the big room or the private school. She asked about seeing you every day. That tells you everything you need to know about what she values. Megan looked up at Ruby with tears in her eyes. Do you really think we convinced him? That he believes we're together? I think he's suspicious, Ruby said honestly. But I also think he's going to have a hard time arguing that Emma isn't happy and well cared for. She's clearly thriving, Megan. Anyone can see that. They spent the evening waiting for Emma to return, both of them too nervous to do much more than pick at the dinner Ruby had made. When David's car pulled up at exactly 8 o'clock, they both rushed to the window to watch. Emma bounded up the front walk, chattering excitedly to her father about something. David walked more slowly, his expression thoughtful. When they reached the front door, Ruby and Megan were waiting. How was dinner? Megan asked, as Emma threw herself into her arms. Amazing, Emma said. The meatballs really were as big as golf balls, and they had this chocolate cake that was taller than my head. That sounds incredible, Ruby said. Did you save room for breakfast tomorrow? Barely, Emma said with a giggle. David stood in the doorway, watching the easy interaction between the three of them. Thank you for dinner, Daddy, Emma said, turning to hug him goodbye. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart, David said, holding her tight. I'll see you again soon, okay? At my birthday party? Emma asked hopefully. We'll see, David said, glancing at Megan. I need to talk to your mom about some things first. After Emma went to brush her teeth and get ready for bed, David lingered on the front porch with Megan and Ruby. She seems happy, he said finally, and Ruby could hear the reluctance in his voice. She is happy, Megan said. This is her home, David. These are her people. David looked at Ruby. How long have you been working at the bakery? 2 years, Ruby said. I love it there. It's like being part of a big family. And before that? Ruby felt like she was being cross-examined, but she kept her voice steady. I worked at a restaurant downtown. Before that, I was in college. What did you study? Art and business, Ruby said. I thought I might open my own gallery someday, but I discovered I love baking more than I love selling other people's art. David nodded slowly, filing away this information. And your family? Are they local? Ruby hesitated for just a moment. This was getting into territory they hadn't prepared for. My parents live in California, she said. We're not very close. I see, David said. Well, it's been interesting meeting you, Ruby. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. After he left, Ruby and Megan helped Emma get ready for bed. Emma was full of stories about dinner and excited about her upcoming birthday party, but Ruby noticed that she didn't mention anything about David's suggestion that she move to Chicago. Either she'd forgotten about it, or she'd dismissed it entirely. Ruby, Emma said as Ruby tucked her in, is Daddy mad about something? Ruby glanced toward the doorway, where Megan was listening. Why do you ask, sweetheart? He seemed different tonight, like he was thinking really hard about something. And he asked me lots of questions about you and Mom. What kind of questions? Megan asked, coming into the room. Like if you and Ruby are happy together, and if I like having Ruby around, and if you seem different since Ruby started coming over, Emma said. I told him you're both really happy and that I love having Ruby here because she makes you smile more, Mom. Megan's eyes filled with tears, and she had to look away for a moment. Ruby felt her heart clench at the simple honesty in Emma's words. Your dad just wants to make sure you're okay, Ruby said gently. That's what good dads do. They worry about their kids, but I am okay, Emma said, looking confused. I'm really, really okay. Better than okay, actually. After Emma fell asleep, Ruby and Megan sat in the living room, both of them emotionally drained from the evening. I think it went well, Ruby said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Emma was perfect. She made it clear that she's happy here, that she doesn't want to leave. But David's not going to give up, Megan said. I could see it in his eyes. He's going to dig deeper, ask more questions. What if he finds out we're not really together? Then we make sure he doesn't find out, Ruby said firmly. We have 4 more days until the party. 4 more days to convince him that this is real. Megan looked at her with something that might have been hope. You really think we can do this? Ruby thought about Emma's gap-toothed smile, about the way Megan's whole face lit up when she talked about her daughter, about the feeling of belonging she'd experienced over the past 2 days. I know we can, she said. Because the most important part isn't even pretend. Emma really is happy. You really are an amazing mother, and I really do care about both of you more than I ever expected to. Megan reached over and took Ruby's hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this. Ruby squeezed back, thinking about how much her life had changed in just 3 days. You don't need to repay me, she said. This being here with you and Emma, it's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both of them thinking about the week ahead and the strange, unexpected connection that was growing between them. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, and inside, Emma slept peacefully in her room, surrounded by her art and her books and all the evidence of a childhood filled with love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they were a family. Even if it was just pretend, it felt real enough to matter. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Ruby was in the kitchen making coffee when her phone rang, displaying a number she didn't recognize. Hello? She answered cautiously. Is this Ruby Martinez? The voice was crisp, professional, and unfamiliar. Yes, who's calling? This is Jennifer Walsh from Walsh & Associates. I'm calling on behalf of David Lewis regarding his daughter Emma. I understand you've been spending time with the child and her mother? Ruby's blood ran cold. David had hired a private investigator. She gestured frantically to Megan, who was helping Emma get ready for school in the next room. I'm sorry, who did you say you were? Ruby asked, stalling for time. I'm a private investigator, Ms. Martinez. Mr. Lewis has asked me to conduct a background check as part of his custody evaluation. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Megan Lewis and her daughter. Megan appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale when she saw Ruby's expression. Ruby put the phone on speaker and mouthed, "Private investigator." I'm not sure I'm comfortable discussing my personal relationships with a stranger, Ruby said carefully. I understand your hesitation, but this is a routine part of custody proceedings when new romantic partners are involved with minor children. I can ask these questions now, or I can include in my report that you were uncooperative. Which would you prefer? Ruby felt trapped. Refusing to answer would look suspicious, but she was terrified of saying something that would expose their deception. "What do you want to know?" she asked finally. "Let's start with basic information. How long have you known Megan Lewis?" "About 6 months," Ruby said, sticking to their agreed-upon timeline. "And how would you characterize your relationship?" We're in a committed relationship," Ruby said, her voice sounding strained even to her own ears. "Are you living together?" "Not officially. I have my own apartment, but I spend a lot of time at Megan's house." "How often would you say you stay overnight?" Ruby's mind raced. Too often would suggest they were moving too fast. Not often enough would suggest they weren't serious. "A few nights a week," she said. "And how has Emma responded to your presence in her life?" "She's been wonderful," Ruby said, and this part was completely honest. "She's a remarkable little girl, very smart and creative." "Has she expressed any concerns about her mother's new relationship?" "No, quite the opposite. She seems happy that her mother is happy." "I see. And what are your long-term intentions regarding this relationship?" The question hung in the air. Ruby looked at Megan, who was gripping the kitchen counter so tightly her knuckles were white. "We're taking things one day at a time," Ruby said finally. "But I care about both Megan and Emma very much." Have you and Megan discussed marriage? Moving in together? Having children together?" "Those are very personal questions," Ruby said, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Lewis needs to understand the stability and permanence of this relationship as it affects his daughter's living situation." Ruby took a deep breath. "We've talked about the future, yes. We're both committed to making this work. I'll need to verify your employment and background information." "You work at Sweet Dreams Bakery?" "Yes." "For how long?" 2 years. "And before that?" Ruby went through her work history, trying to keep her answers consistent with what she'd told David the night before. The investigator asked about her education, her family, her financial situation, and her criminal background, which thankfully was non-existent. "One final question, Ms. Martinez. Are you aware that Mr. Lewis is considering seeking full custody of his daughter?" Ruby's heart pounded. "I know he's concerned about Emma's welfare, as any good father would be. And how do you think Emma would feel about living with her father full-time?" "I think Emma is happy where she is," Ruby said firmly. "She loves her mother, her school, her friends, her life here. I can't imagine she'd want to leave all of that behind. Thank you for your time, Ms. Martinez. Someone from our office may be in touch if we have additional questions." The line went dead, and Ruby sank into a kitchen chair, her hands shaking. "Oh, God," Megan whispered. "He's really doing this. He's really trying to take her away from me." Emma's voice drifted in from the living room, where she was gathering her school supplies and humming to herself, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. "We need to be more careful," Ruby said quietly. "If they're investigating us, they might be watching the house, checking our stories, talking to neighbors." "What if they find out we're lying?" Megan asked, panic creeping into her voice. "What if they discover we barely know each other?" "They won't," Ruby said with more confidence than she felt. "We just need to make sure our story is airtight. No contradictions, no slip-ups." "Mom," Emma called from the living room. "We're going to be late for the bus." They walked Emma to the bus stop as usual, but Ruby was hyper-aware of their surroundings, wondering if someone was watching them, taking photos, documenting their interactions. Mrs. Chen waved from her garden, and Ruby wondered if the investigator had already spoken to her. "Act natural," Ruby murmured to Megan as they walked back to the house. "I don't remember what natural feels like anymore," Megan replied. Back at the house, they sat at the kitchen table and went over their story again, trying to anticipate what other questions the investigator might ask. They created a more detailed timeline of their relationship, discussed what they would say about their future plans, and rehearsed answers to potential questions about their finances and living arrangements. "We need to make this look more real," Ruby said. "If they're watching the house, they need to see evidence that I actually stay here regularly." "What do you mean?" "I should bring more of my things over. Clothes, toiletries, personal items, and we should be seen together more often in public. Going to the grocery store, running errands, doing normal couple things." Megan nodded. "You're right. And we should we should be more physically affectionate when we're out." holding hands, standing close together. They spent the afternoon making Ruby's presence in the house more convincing. Ruby brought over more clothes and hung them in Megan's closet. She added her shampoo and toothbrush to the bathroom, put a few of her books on the nightstand, and even brought over some of her mail to make it look like she received correspondence at the address. Around lunchtime, they decided to go grocery shopping together, both to pick up supplies for Emma's birthday party and to be seen in public as a couple. Ruby drove, and they made a point of holding hands as they walked through the parking lot. Inside the store, they tried to act like a normal couple doing normal errands. Ruby pushed the cart while Megan consulted her list, and they discussed what to make for dinner and whether they had enough decorations for the party. "We need balloons," Megan said, checking her list. "And I want to get those number candles, an 8, and maybe some extras in case Emma wants to make a wish on more than one." "What about party favors?" Ruby asked, getting into the role. "When I was a kid, I always loved the little bags of candy and toys." "Emma would love that," Megan said with a genuine smile. "You're good at this party planning thing." They were in the baking aisle, discussing cake ingredients, when Ruby noticed a woman at the end of the aisle who seemed to be paying unusual attention to them. She was middle-aged, professionally dressed, and holding a phone in a way that suggested she might be taking photos. "Don't look now," Ruby said quietly. "But I think we're being watched." Megan's hand tightened on the shopping cart handle. "Where?" "End of the aisle, woman in the blue blazer." Megan casually glanced in that direction, then looked back at Ruby with wide eyes. "What do we do?" "Act natural," Ruby said, then did something that surprised both of them. She leaned over and kissed Megan's cheek softly. "We're just a couple shopping for our daughter's birthday party." The kiss was brief and innocent, but Ruby felt Megan's sharp intake of breath and noticed the way her cheeks flushed pink. When Ruby pulled back, their eyes met for a moment, and something passed between them that felt more real than anything they'd practiced. "Good thinking," Megan said quietly, her voice slightly breathless. They finished their shopping, making sure to act affectionate and comfortable with each other. Ruby kept her arm around Megan's waist as they waited in the checkout line, and Megan leaned into her naturally, as if they'd been together for years instead of days. The woman in the blue blazer was nowhere to be seen when they left the store, but Ruby had the distinct feeling they were still being watched. "This is so surreal," Megan said as they drove home. 3 days ago, I didn't even know you existed. Now we're being investigated by private detectives and pretending to be in love in grocery stores. How are you feeling about all of this?" Ruby asked. "Really?" Megan was quiet for a moment. "Scared," she said finally. "But also, I don't know. There are moments when it doesn't feel like pretending anymore, like when you kissed my cheek back there. For a second, I forgot we were acting." Ruby felt her heart skip a beat. "I know what you mean." They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for Emma's return from school and continuing to build their cover story. Ruby helped Megan clean the house and organize Emma's birthday decorations, and they worked together with an easy rhythm that felt natural and comfortable. When Emma burst through the front door that afternoon, she was full of excitement about her upcoming party and questions about the preparations. "Did you get my cake ingredients?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. "Can I help decorate it? Will it have flowers on it like the ones in Ruby's bakery?" "We got everything we need," Ruby said, showing Emma the bags of flour, sugar, and food coloring they'd bought. "And yes, you can definitely help decorate. We're going to make the most beautiful cake you've ever seen." "What about the party games?" Emma asked. "Are we going to have a piñata?" "Even better," Megan said with a mysterious smile. "Ruby has some special surprises planned." Emma looked at Ruby with wide, excited eyes. "What kind of surprises? If I told you, they wouldn't be surprises," Ruby said, ruffling Emma's hair. "But I promise you're going to love them." They spent the evening working on party preparations, with Emma helping to blow up balloons and arrange decorations, while Ruby and Megan cooked dinner together. It felt domestic and peaceful, like the calm before a storm. After Emma went to bed, Ruby and Megan sat in the living room, both of them exhausted from the stress of the day. "Do you think we're convincing enough?" Megan asked. "I keep worrying that we're going to slip up, say something wrong, give ourselves away." "I think we're doing better than either of us expected," Ruby said honestly. "The hard part isn't acting like we care about each other. That part feels natural. The hard part is remembering that it's supposed to be an act." Megan looked at her with surprise. What do you mean? Ruby hesitated, not sure how much she should reveal. I mean that being here with you and Emma, it doesn't feel like pretending anymore. It feels like the most real thing I've ever done. Ruby, Megan started, but she was interrupted by the sound of Ruby's phone ringing. Ruby looked at the caller ID and felt her stomach drop. It was the private investigator again. Ms. Martinez, this is Jennifer Walsh. I have a few follow-up questions if you don't mind. Ruby put the phone on speaker again so Megan could hear. What can I help you with? Ruby asked. I've been reviewing your background information, and I noticed some inconsistencies in your employment history. You said you worked at a restaurant downtown before the bakery, but I can't find any record of that employment. Ruby's mind raced. She had worked at a restaurant, but it had been a small family-owned place that had closed down 6 months after she left. There probably wouldn't be any records. It was a small place called Mama Rosa's, Ruby said. It closed down about a year ago when the owners retired. I see. And can you provide references from that job? The owners moved back to Italy, Ruby said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. I don't have current contact information for them. What about co-workers, other employees who could verify your employment there? Ruby felt trapped. She could make up names, but what if the investigator tried to track them down? I can try to think of some names, she said finally, but it was a while ago, and I wasn't particularly close with my co-workers there. I understand. One more question. I spoke with some of your neighbors at the bakery, and they mentioned that you've been away from your apartment quite a bit lately. Can you explain that? Ruby's heart pounded. Of course they'd talk to her neighbors. She should have thought of that. I've been spending more time at Megan's house, she said. As our relationship has gotten more serious, I've been staying there more often. How often exactly? Several nights a week, Ruby said, sticking to her earlier answer. And yet your neighbors say they haven't seen you at all in the past 3 days. Ruby felt the walls closing in. I've been here, she said, at Megan's. We're preparing for Emma's birthday party, and with everything that's been going on with the custody situation, Megan needed the support. I see. Well, thank you for your time, Ms. Martinez. I'll be in touch if I have any other questions. After the investigator hung up, Ruby and Megan sat in stunned silence. They know, Megan whispered. They know something's not right. They're suspicious, Ruby corrected, but they don't know anything for certain. We just need to be more careful. Maybe we should call this off, Megan said, panic creeping into her voice. Maybe I should just tell David the truth. Try to work something out with him. No, Ruby said firmly. We've come this far. Emma's party is in 2 days. We can do this. But what if they find out we're lying? What if this makes things worse for Emma? Ruby took Megan's hands in hers, looking directly into her eyes. Listen to me. Emma belongs with you. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with the two of you can see that. David might have money and a fancy house, but you have something he doesn't. You have Emma's heart. We're not going to let him take that away. Megan's eyes filled with tears. I'm so scared, Ruby. I've never been this scared in my life. I know, Ruby said softly. But you're not alone in this anymore. We're going to get through it together. As they sat there holding hands in the quiet living room, Ruby realized that somewhere along the way, her feelings for Megan and Emma had become completely real. This wasn't just about helping a stranger anymore. It was about protecting the family she was starting to think of as her own. The question was, what would happen when the week was over, and they no longer needed to pretend? Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for Emma's 8th birthday party. Ruby woke up early in the guest room, her stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Today was the day they'd been preparing for. The day they needed to convince not just David, but all of Emma's friends and their parents that she and Megan were a real couple. She could hear voices in the kitchen, Emma's excited chatter and Megan's gentle responses as they started the day. Ruby quickly got dressed and joined them, finding Emma already in her party dress, a bright yellow sundress with tiny flowers that made her look like a ray of sunshine. "Ruby!" Emma exclaimed, throwing her arms around Ruby's waist. "It's my birthday! I'm 8 years old!" "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Ruby said, hugging her back. "Are you ready for the best party ever?" "I've been ready since I woke up," Emma said, bouncing on her toes. "Can we start decorating now, please?" Megan laughed, and Ruby noticed that despite the stress of the past few days, she looked genuinely happy this morning. "Let's have breakfast first, birthday girl. We need energy for all the party preparations." They spent the morning transforming the small backyard into a birthday wonderland. Ruby had brought streamers and balloons from the bakery, and they hung them from the trees and fence posts, creating a canopy of color over the small space. Emma helped with everything, her excitement infectious as she directed where each decoration should go. "The purple balloons need to go next to the yellow ones," she instructed seriously, "and the streamers should be twisted, not straight. It looks more fancy that way." Ruby and Megan worked together seamlessly, their movements coordinated like they'd been decorating parties together for years. When Ruby needed tape, Megan handed it to her without being asked. When Megan struggled to reach a high branch, Ruby was there with a step stool. It felt natural and easy, like they were a real team. Around noon, they started working on Emma's birthday cake. Ruby had brought all the professional supplies from the bakery: piping bags, food coloring, edible flowers, and special decorating tools. Emma watched in fascination as Ruby showed her how to mix colors and create different textures with frosting. "Can I try?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with wonder. "Of course," Ruby said, guiding Emma's small hands as she held the piping bag. "Just squeeze gently and move in a steady line." Emma's first attempt was wobbly and uneven, but her face lit up with pride when she saw the pink rosette she'd created. "I did it! Mom, look what I made!" Megan came over to admire Emma's handiwork, and Ruby felt her heart clench at the pure joy on both their faces. This was what mattered. Not David's money or his fancy house, but moments like this, when a mother and daughter shared something special together. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Megan said, kissing the top of Emma's head. "You're a natural artist, just like with your drawings." They worked on the cake together for the next hour, with Emma adding her own decorative touches, while Ruby handled the more complex details. The final result was a masterpiece. 3 layers of vanilla cake with strawberry filling, covered in smooth buttercream, and decorated with sugar flowers, rainbow sprinkles, and Emma's own pink rosettes. "It's the most beautiful cake I've ever seen," Emma breathed, staring at their creation with awe. "It's perfect," Megan agreed. And when she looked at Ruby, her eyes were shining with gratitude, and something deeper that made Ruby's heart skip a beat. The first guests started arriving at 2 o'clock. Emma's friends from school came with their parents, and Ruby watched nervously as Megan introduced her to each family. She could see the curious looks, the way the other parents sized her up, and tried to figure out who she was and what her relationship to Megan might be. "This is Ruby," Megan said to Emma's teacher, Mrs. Johnson, who had come with her own daughter. She's very special to me, Mrs. Johnson smiled warmly and shook Ruby's hand. "It's nice to meet you, Ruby. Emma talks about you all the time. She says you make the most amazing cakes." "I love baking," Ruby said, relaxing slightly. "And Emma's been a wonderful helper. She has real talent." As more guests arrived, Ruby found herself settling into the role more naturally. She helped serve drinks and snacks, organized games for the children, and made conversation with the other parents. Several people commented on how happy Megan seemed, how nice it was to see her smiling again after the difficult divorce. "Megan deserves to be happy," said Sarah, the mother of Emma's best friend Sophia. "She's been through so much this past year. It's wonderful that she found someone who appreciates her." Ruby felt a pang of guilt at the deception, but also a fierce protectiveness toward Megan. These people could see what David apparently couldn't: that Megan was an amazing mother who deserved love and support, not judgment and threats. The party was in full swing when David arrived. Ruby saw him first, walking around the side of the house in his expensive suit, looking completely out of place among the casual, family-friendly chaos of a children's birthday party. He carried a large, elaborately wrapped present, and wore the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Daddy!" Emma shrieked, abandoning the game of musical chairs she'd been playing and running to throw herself into his arms. "Happy birthday, princess," David said, lifting her up and spinning her around. "I brought you something special." Emma's eyes went wide when she saw the size of the present. "Can I open it now?" "Of course," David said, setting her down. "But maybe we should go inside where it's quieter." Ruby felt Megan tense beside her. David was trying to separate Emma from the party, from her friends and the celebration they'd worked so hard to create. "Actually," Megan said smoothly, "why don't we open presents after we sing happy birthday? Emma's been looking forward to showing off her cake to everyone." "Yeah," Emma said, bouncing excitedly. "You have to see my cake, Daddy. Ruby and I made it together, and it has real sugar flowers." David's gaze moved to Ruby, and she could see him taking in every detail, the way she stood close to Megan, the easy familiarity with which she interacted with Emma and the other guests, the fact that she was clearly an integral part of this celebration. "How thoughtful," he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. "Ruby, isn't it? We met the other day." "That's right," Ruby said, moving closer to Megan and taking her hand. "It's nice to see you again, David. Emma's been so excited that you could make it to her party." "I wouldn't miss my daughter's birthday," David said, and there was something in his tone that suggested Ruby had implied otherwise. The tension was broken by Sophia's mother calling for everyone to gather around for the birthday song. Emma practically glowed as all her friends and family sang to her, her face radiant with joy as she made a wish and blew out her candles. Ruby found herself blinking back tears at the pure happiness on the little girl's face. "What did you wish for?" Sophia asked as Emma cut the first piece of cake. "I can't tell you or it won't come true," Emma said seriously. "But it was a really good wish." As they served cake and ice cream to the guests, Ruby noticed David watching everything with a calculating expression. He spoke politely to the other parents, complimented the decorations and the cake, and played the role of the devoted father perfectly. But Ruby could see him cataloging every detail, looking for ammunition to use in his custody battle. When it came time for presents, Emma opened each gift with enthusiasm and genuine gratitude. She thanked each friend personally and made sure to show her appreciation for every gift, no matter how small. Ruby felt proud watching her, seeing the kindness and grace that Megan had instilled in her daughter. David's gift was last, and it was exactly what Ruby had expected: an expensive tablet loaded with educational games and apps, the kind of present that was impressive and practical, but lacked the personal touch of the handmade friendship bracelets and art supplies her friends had given her. "Thank you, Daddy," Emma said, hugging him tightly. "This is really cool." "I thought you could use it for your schoolwork," David said, "and there are some great learning programs on there that will help you get ahead in your studies." Ruby noticed that Emma's enthusiasm dimmed slightly at the mention of schoolwork, but she was too polite to say anything. This was David's approach to parenting. Everything had to have an educational purpose, even birthday presents. As the party wound down and guests started to leave, Ruby helped clean up, while Megan walked families to their cars and thanked them for coming. David lingered, helping Emma organize her new gifts and engaging her in conversation about school and her friends. "Emma seems to have adjusted well to your new living situation," David said to Ruby when Megan was out of earshot. "She's a resilient kid," Ruby replied carefully, "and Megan's done an amazing job helping her through the transition." "The transition from our divorce, you mean?" "That, and adjusting to having me around more often," Ruby said. "It's a big change for a child when their parent starts a new relationship." David nodded slowly. "And how long did you say you and Megan have been together?" Ruby felt like she was being tested. "About 6 months. We took things slowly because of Emma." "Very considerate," David said, but his tone suggested he found something suspicious about their timeline. "And you're planning to move in together soon?" "We're discussing it," Ruby said, trying to sound casual. "We want to make sure Emma's comfortable with the idea first. Of course. Emma's comfort is the most important thing." The way he said it made Ruby feel like she was walking into a trap, but before she could respond, Emma came running over with a piece of cake for her father. "Daddy, you have to try this. Ruby made it, and it's the best cake in the whole world." David accepted the cake with a smile, taking a bite and making appropriate appreciative noises. "It's delicious, sweetheart. Ruby is very talented. She's going to teach me how to make professional cakes," Emma said proudly. "And we're going to plant a garden together this spring, and she's going to help me build a treehouse in the backyard." Ruby felt her heart sink. Emma was making plans for a future that didn't exist, building dreams around a relationship that was supposed to end in 2 days. "That sounds wonderful," David said, but his eyes were on Ruby, and she could see the wheels turning in his head. "Ruby seems very invested in your future here." After David left, promising to call Emma during the week, the three of them finished cleaning up the party debris. Emma was exhausted but happy, chattering about her favorite moments from the day as they gathered balloons and folded up tables. "That was the best birthday party ever," she declared as they carried the last of the decorations inside. "Thank you, Mom." "Thank you, Ruby. This was perfect." "I'm so glad you had fun, sweetheart," Megan said, hugging her daughter close. "You deserve the most wonderful birthday." As they got Emma ready for bed, Ruby felt a bittersweet ache in her chest. The party had been a success. Emma was happy. The other parents had clearly accepted Ruby as part of the family, and they'd presented a united front to David. But it was also a reminder of what she would be giving up when this week ended. "Ruby," Emma said as Ruby tucked her in, "will you still be here for my next birthday?" The question hit Ruby like a physical blow. She looked toward the doorway where Megan was standing, and saw her own pain reflected in Megan's eyes. "I hope so, sweetheart," Ruby said softly, not trusting herself to say more. "Good," Emma said sleepily. "Because you're the best almost stepmom ever." Ruby's breath caught in her throat. Almost stepmom. Emma had been thinking about their relationship in those terms, imagining a future where Ruby was a permanent part of her family. After Emma fell asleep, Ruby and Megan sat in the living room, both of them emotionally drained from the day. "She thinks this is real," Megan said quietly. "She's making plans, talking about the future like you're going to be here forever." "I know," Ruby said, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't think about how this would affect her when it's over." "When it's over," Megan repeated, and there was something in her voice that Ruby couldn't quite identify. "Is that what you want? For this to be over?" Ruby looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same confusion and longing that she'd been feeling all week. "I don't know," she said honestly. "A week ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life looked like. I had my job, my apartment, my routine. I was fine being alone. And now? Now I can't imagine going back to that empty apartment and pretending this never happened," Ruby said. "But I also don't know if what we have is real or just circumstantial. We're playing roles, Megan. How do we know what's genuine and what's just good acting?" Megan was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "I know that when you kissed my cheek in the grocery store, my heart stopped," she said finally. "I know that watching you with Emma today made me feel things I haven't felt in years, and I know that the thought of you leaving on Monday makes me want to cry." Ruby felt her own heart racing. "Megan, I know this is complicated," Megan continued. "I know we started this for all the wrong reasons, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being about David and started being about us, about the family we could be." Ruby reached for Megan's hand, intertwining their fingers. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe we don't have to pretend anymore," Megan said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we can make this real." Before Ruby could respond, they heard a sound from Emma's room, a soft cry that suggested she was having a bad dream. They both rushed to check on her, finding Emma tossing restlessly in her bed. "Mommy?" Emma called out, still half asleep. "Ruby?" "We're here, sweetheart," Megan said, sitting on the edge of the bed and stroking Emma's hair. "I had a bad dream," Emma said, tears in her eyes. "Daddy was trying to take me away, and I couldn't find you." Ruby felt her heart break for this little girl who was carrying worries no 8-year-old should have to bear. She sat on the other side of the bed and took Emma's hand. "It was just a dream," Ruby said gently. "You're safe here with your mom." "But what if Daddy really does try to take me away?" Emma asked, looking between them with frightened eyes. "What if I have to go live in Chicago and I never see you again?" Megan and Ruby exchanged a look over Emma's head. They both knew that David's custody challenge was very real, and that despite their best efforts, there were no guarantees about what would happen. "Emma," Megan said carefully, "no matter what happens, you will always be loved. Your daddy loves you, and I love you, and Ruby loves you too." "But I want to stay here," Emma said, her voice small and scared. I want us to be a family. Ruby felt tears prick at her eyes. We are a family, she said, and as the words left her mouth, she realized they were completely true. No matter what happens, we're a family. Emma seemed comforted by this, and she settled back into sleep with both Megan and Ruby sitting beside her. They stayed there for a long time, watching her peaceful face and thinking about the uncertain future that lay ahead. When they finally returned to the living room, the conversation they'd been having felt both more urgent and more impossible. The stakes weren't just about their own feelings anymore. Emma's heart was involved too. We can't make any decisions right now, Megan said finally. Not with everything that's happening with David. It wouldn't be fair to Emma to give her hope and then... I understand, Ruby said, though every fiber of her being wanted to argue. But Megan, when this is all over, when we know Emma's safe and settled, I want to have this conversation again. I want to explore what this could be. Megan nodded, tears in her eyes. I want that too. They sat together in the quiet house, holding hands and thinking about the impossible situation they'd found themselves in. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they were a family. Even if it was complicated and uncertain and built on a foundation of deception, it was real in all the ways that mattered. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, and inside, Emma slept peacefully, surrounded by the evidence of a perfect 8th birthday and the love of 2 women who would do anything to protect her happiness. Sunday morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Ruby was making breakfast when she noticed a car parked across the street that hadn't been there the night before. A nondescript sedan with tinted windows and a clear view of Megan's front door. Her stomach dropped as she realized they were being watched. Megan, she called quietly, not wanting to alarm Emma, who was still sleeping. Come look at this. Megan joined her at the kitchen window, and her face went pale when she saw the car. How long do you think they've been there? I don't know. But we need to assume they saw me leave my apartment yesterday morning and come here, Ruby said. Which means they know I spent the night. Is that good or bad for our story? Good, I think. It supports the idea that we're in a serious relationship. Ruby paused, thinking, but it also means we need to be extra careful today. Everything we do is being documented. They went through their morning routine with the awareness that they were performing for an audience. Ruby made coffee while Megan started breakfast, and they moved around each other in the kitchen with the easy familiarity of a couple who had shared many mornings together. When Emma woke up and joined them, still glowing from her birthday party, they included her in their performance without making it feel forced or artificial. What should we do today? Emma asked, still in her pajamas and with her hair sticking up in all directions. Can we go to the park, or maybe the zoo? Those are great ideas, Megan said, but I think we should have a quiet day at home. You had a big party yesterday, and you probably need some rest. Emma pouted slightly but didn't argue. Ruby noticed how Megan balanced being a loving mother with setting appropriate boundaries, something David would never be able to criticize. Around 10 o'clock, Ruby's phone rang. The caller ID showed the private investigator's number, and Ruby felt her stomach clench with anxiety. Ms. Martinez, the crisp voice said when Ruby answered. I have a few more questions for you, if you don't mind. Of course, Ruby said, putting the phone on speaker so Megan could hear. I've been reviewing your financial records, and I noticed some interesting patterns. You've made several large cash deposits over the past 6 months. Can you explain those? Ruby's mind raced. She did make cash deposits regularly. Tips from the bakery, payment for occasional catering jobs, money from selling her artwork at local craft fairs. But she could see how it might look suspicious to someone looking for evidence of deception. I work in the service industry, Ruby said carefully. I receive tips in cash, and I also do some freelance baking and art projects on the side. I see. And can you provide documentation for these freelance projects? Some of them, Ruby said. Not all of my clients require formal contracts, especially for smaller jobs. What kind of art projects? Ruby felt like she was walking through a minefield. Paintings, mostly. I sell them at local craft fairs and sometimes through word of mouth. And the baking projects? Birthday cakes, wedding cakes, special occasion desserts. Again, mostly word-of-mouth referrals. I'll need a list of these clients, the investigator said, names and contact information. Ruby's heart pounded. She could provide some names, but not enough to account for all the cash deposits the investigator was questioning. I'll put together what I have, she said. One more thing, Ms. Martinez. I spoke with your landlord yesterday. He mentioned that you've been behind on rent twice in the past year. How do you reconcile that with your claims of financial stability? Ruby felt trapped. She had been behind on rent, once when she'd had to take time off work for a minor surgery, and once when the bakery had reduced hours during a slow period. But admitting to financial instability would undermine their argument that she was a positive influence in Emma's life. I had some temporary setbacks, Ruby said, but I've always caught up on my payments, and my current financial situation is stable. Define stable. I have steady employment, savings, and no significant debt, Ruby said, which was mostly true. I see. Well, thank you for your time, Ms. Martinez. I'll be in touch if I have any other questions. After the investigator hung up, Ruby and Megan sat in stunned silence. Emma was in the living room watching cartoons, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. They're really digging deep, Megan said quietly. Financial records, employment history, talking to landlords and neighbors. This is more thorough than I expected. They're looking for anything they can use to discredit me, Ruby said. Any evidence that I'm not a stable, positive influence in Emma's life. Are you worried about what they'll find? Ruby considered the question honestly. I'm not perfect, she said. I've had some financial struggles. I don't have a college degree. I've never been married or had kids. On paper, I probably don't look like ideal stepmother material. But you're not on paper, Megan said fiercely. You're real, and you're kind, and you love Emma. That should count for more than anything else. Unfortunately, family court doesn't always see it that way, Ruby said. They look at stability, financial security, educational background, all the things David can provide that I can't. They spent the rest of the morning trying to act normal, while being hyper-aware of the surveillance car across the street. Ruby helped Emma with a puzzle while Megan did laundry, and they all worked together to clean up the remaining party decorations from the backyard. Around noon, David called to speak with Emma. Megan put the call on speaker, and Ruby listened as Emma chattered excitedly about her party and her new presents. I'm glad you had such a wonderful birthday, sweetheart, David said. I was thinking, how would you like to come visit me in Chicago next weekend? We could go to that big science museum you've been wanting to see. Emma's face lit up. Really? That would be amazing. Great. I'll make the arrangements with your mother. After Emma handed the phone back to Megan, David's tone became more serious. I'd like to discuss the logistics of that visit, Megan, and I think it's time we had a more detailed conversation about Emma's future. What kind of conversation? Megan asked, though Ruby could see from her expression that she already knew. I think you know what kind, David said. I'll be in touch soon to set up a meeting. Just the two of us. After he hung up, Megan sank onto the couch, her face pale. He's going to make his move, she said. The visit to Chicago is just the beginning. He's going to try to convince Emma that his life is better, and then he's going to file for full custody. Ruby sat beside her and took her hand. We won't let that happen. How can we stop it? You heard what the investigator is finding. My financial struggles, your employment history, the fact that we've only been together for 6 months. How does any of that compete with David's stability and resources? Because Emma doesn't want to go, Ruby said firmly. She's made that clear, and any judge worth their salt will take a child's preferences into account, especially at Emma's age. But what if David convinces her? What if he shows her this amazing life in Chicago and she starts to think that's what she wants? Ruby didn't have an answer for that. She'd seen how Emma's eyes had lit up at the mention of the science museum, how excited she'd been about the expensive tablet David had given her. It would be easy for a wealthy, charming father to dazzle an 8-year-old with promises of adventure and luxury. The afternoon passed quietly, with all three of them feeling the weight of the uncertain future hanging over them. Emma seemed to sense the tension, becoming more clingy and asking repeatedly if Ruby was going to stay for dinner, if she'd be there when Emma woke up, if they could all watch a movie together. Of course I'll stay, Ruby said each time, and she meant it. Whatever happened with David's custody challenge, she wasn't going to abandon Emma or Megan now. That evening, as they were finishing dinner, there was a knock at the front door. Megan and Ruby exchanged worried glances. They weren't expecting anyone, and unexpected visitors had become a source of anxiety. Megan opened the door to find Mrs. Chen standing on the front porch, holding a covered dish and wearing a concerned expression. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Mrs. Chen said, "but I brought you some soup. I noticed you've had a lot of visitors lately, and I thought you might be dealing with some stress." "That's very kind of you," Megan said, accepting the dish. "Would you like to come in for a moment?" Mrs. Chen stepped inside, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. Ruby helping Emma with her homework at the kitchen table, the comfortable domesticity of their evening routine. "I hope you don't mind me saying," Mrs. Chen said quietly to Megan, "but that woman who was asking questions about you yesterday seemed very official. Is everything all right?" Ruby felt her heart skip a beat. The investigator had been talking to the neighbors. "What kind of questions?" Megan asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "About your relationship with Ruby, how long she's been coming around, whether Emma seems happy. I told her that you're a wonderful mother and that Emma is lucky to have you both." Mrs. Chen paused, studying Megan's face, but I got the impression she was looking for problems, not solutions. "Thank you for being supportive," Megan said. "It means a lot to know we have good neighbors." Mrs. Chen nodded, then looked toward the kitchen where Ruby was patiently helping Emma with her math homework. "That young woman is good for you," she said quietly. "I can see it in the way Emma smiles now, the way you carry yourself. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." After Mrs. Chen left, Ruby and Megan sat Emma down for a gentle conversation about the week ahead. "Sweetheart," Megan said, "you know how Daddy wants you to visit him in Chicago next weekend?" Emma nodded eagerly. "We're going to see the Science Museum and maybe go to a baseball game." "That sounds wonderful," Megan said. "But I want you to remember something while you're there. No matter how much fun you have, no matter what Daddy shows you or promises you, this is your home. Ruby and I will be here waiting for you when you get back." Emma looked confused. "Why wouldn't you be here?" Ruby and Megan exchanged a look. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her father might try to convince her to abandon everything she knows and loves? "We just want you to know that you always have choices," Ruby said carefully, "and that we love you no matter what." "I love you too," Emma said simply. "Both of you. You're my family." As they tucked Emma into bed that night, Ruby felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. This little girl trusted them to protect her, to keep her safe and loved. The thought of failing her was unbearable. "Ruby," Emma said as Ruby was about to turn off the light. "Are you scared about anything?" The question caught Ruby off guard. "Why do you ask, sweetheart? You and Mom seem worried about something. And there was that lady asking Mrs. Chen questions about us. Is someone trying to hurt our family?" Ruby sat back down on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes adults have to deal with complicated situations," she said. "But you don't need to worry about that. Your job is just to be 8 years old and enjoy being a kid. But if someone was trying to hurt our family, you'd protect us, right?" "Always," Ruby said without hesitation. "I will always protect you and your mom." Emma smiled and settled back into her pillow, apparently satisfied with this answer. But as Ruby left the room, she wondered if she was making a promise she might not be able to keep. Later that night, as Ruby and Megan sat in the living room going over their story one more time, they both felt the pressure of the week ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new opportunities for their deception to be exposed. "Whatever happens," Megan said, taking Ruby's hand, "I want you to know that this week has been the best week of my life in a very long time. You've given Emma and me something precious. The feeling of being a complete family." "You've given me something too," Ruby said. "A purpose, a reason to care about something bigger than myself." They sat in comfortable silence, both of them thinking about the impossible situation they'd found themselves in and the very real feelings that had developed despite the artificial circumstances. Outside, the surveillance car remained in position, a constant reminder that their every move was being watched and judged. But inside, in the warm glow of the living room lamp, they were just two women who had found something unexpected and precious in each other, something worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. Monday morning arrived with a sense of finality that hung heavy in the air. This was supposed to be Ruby's last day of pretending to be Megan's partner, the end of their elaborate charade. But as Ruby woke up in the guest room and heard Emma's laughter echoing from the kitchen, she realized that nothing about this felt like an ending. The surveillance car was still parked across the street, and Ruby wondered if the investigators had worked in shifts through the night or if they'd simply left the car there as a psychological tactic. Either way, the message was clear. They were being watched, and every move they made was being documented. Emma was unusually quiet during breakfast, picking at her cereal and glancing between Ruby and her mother with a worried expression. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Megan asked, sitting down beside her daughter. "Are you and Ruby going to break up?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice small and scared. Ruby nearly choked on her coffee. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you both seem sad," Emma said. "And yesterday you kept talking about things ending and people leaving." "Are you going to leave us, Ruby?" The question hit Ruby like a physical blow. She looked at Megan, who was staring at her with the same desperate hope that Emma was showing. Ruby started, then stopped. How could she explain that their relationship had been fake from the beginning, but that her feelings had become completely real? How could she tell this little girl that she wanted nothing more than to stay, but that the circumstances that had brought them together were about to tear them apart? Before Ruby could answer, there was a sharp knock at the front door. They all froze, and Ruby felt her stomach drop. It was barely 8 in the morning, too early for a social call. Megan went to answer the door, and Ruby heard a man's voice that she didn't recognize. "Ms. Lewis, I'm Detective Martinez with the Family Services Division. I need to speak with you about your custody arrangement." Ruby felt the blood drain from her face. Detective Martinez. They shared a last name, which could complicate.